love. Welcome back to Confidently Cherished. Growing up, I used to always hear people talk about how women gossip so much, how women are always talking about other women behind their backs. They're the ones always spreading rumors. They're always the ones being messy, right? But that wasn't my reality. In the reality that I grew up in, there were certain men at my church who were the biggest gossips ever. In fact, there were men in my church who were kind of like uncles to me and whom I was very close to. And whenever something messy happened, I never went to the women. I immediately went to them because I knew that they were going to have all the tea about who started what argument, why the argument started, what the person's planning on doing about it, who confronted who, all of that. And I think it's a great example of the fact that when we talk about wounded feminine energy and wounded masculine energy, that these things are not relegated to just one gender. I had a woman who, before she deleted all of her comments, was in my YouTube fighting for her life because I made a video about wounded feminine energy, and she immediately got offended by this and started asking me in the comments, why wouldn't I call this like unbalanced masculine? Why would I make this about women? Why would I be such a misogynist? And look, like, okay, girl, if you feel the need to be all up in someone's comments doing that, you have bigger issues. But anyways, wounded feminine energy knows no gender. As women, we have feminine energy. We also have masculine energy. As men have masculine energy. They also have feminine energy. If you want a better understanding of what those energies look like, I've done previous podcast episodes on this. So knock yourself out. Feel free to go listen to those after you listen to this episode. But where wounded feminine energy stems from, where having a feminine wound, a mother wound comes from, is this idea of having a mother who was not there to give you emotional support. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that she abandoned you. This doesn't necessarily mean that she was a bad mother, right? So you can have this mother wound and have a mother who was physically present. She could have been a source of financial support. But for some reason, she didn't give the emotional support you needed. So maybe she wasn't equipped. She didn't get that type of support and love when she was younger, so she didn't know how to give it. Maybe she was working all the time in order to pay the bills. And because of that, she wasn't around to give the emotional support. But when we have these mother wounds come up in our lives, they often manifest into a very wounded energy as we become adults. We talk all the time about daddy issues, but rarely do we talk about what it means to have mommy issues, right? When you are operating out of a place of wounded feminine energy, oftentimes you struggle with the things that come out of your mouth. And this comes from a need it really comes from two places. It comes from, one, a need to get attention, a need to be noticed, to be recognized, and simultaneously coming from this fact that because as a child you didn't receive this type of attention, you didn't receive the type of emotional support that you needed, you get used to fulfilling your own needs. You get used to looking after yourself, taking care of yourself. So I want to get back to the gossiping that I mentioned at the beginning of this episode in a second. But when it comes to the being used to fulfilling your own needs, what this often looks like is, as someone who's operating in wounded feminine, you keep your mouth closed when it really, really should be open. So this means that you have a hard time with enforcing boundaries. So I often see this when women work with me. We talk about the need to have boundaries. We identify what boundaries need to be set in place. We talk about all the ways in which these boundaries are going to make their relationships with their parents, their friends, their partners, the ways in which these boundaries are going to make all those relationships so much better. And they leave that session feeling hyped, right? They're ready to do this. They want to change their lives. They want to have better relationships. And in our working together, they truly understand how these boundaries are going to be a key to that. But then, they leave the comfort of our session and they go out into the real world. And at first, actually setting those boundaries is a major struggle, right? They set them, they're ready to live in those. But then the minute that someone tests that boundary, they have a hard time opening their mouths and enforcing it. They have a hard time speaking up for the things that they need because they grew up in an environment where you didn't really do that. They grew up in an environment where they had to keep the peace. They grew up in an environment where maybe they were trying to be helpful, especially in cases where you see someone who grew up and their mother was either literally a single mother, there was no father around, or she was, sometimes I think this is even worse, a married single mother. So she had a husband, but he didn't really do very much, right? He, went to work, brought home a paycheck, and then didn't really do anything around the house, didn't really do anything as far as the kids were involved. You see men like this who don't even know their children's birthdays, even though they're in the house. So because they saw their mother struggle so much, they often took it upon themselves to fix the problem. As in, I will do everything in my power to not be the problem. I won't bring up anything that could possibly stress her out. And this sounds nice in theory, but what happens is you teach your inner child, who is still around when you become an adult, you teach this inner child that your needs are not worth being met. You teach this inner child that no one, including yourself, needs to listen to you. So what ends up happening is you find yourself in situations as an adult where you don't speak up for yourself. You don't defend yourself. You don't set the boundaries that you need to have in place, or you set them, but you don't enforce them. So you get into this point where you get in relationships and you wonder why your needs aren't being met. You wonder why it is that people can't seem to fulfill you when, yes, no one else can fulfill you. You have to have your own love for yourself. You have to be able to satisfy yourself. But at the same time, there are people who want to come into your life and make your life better, make your life easier, but they aren't mind readers. And if you can't speak up for yourself, if you can't explain what it is that you need to be happy in a relationship, no one is ever going to be able to do those things for you unless they know that those are the things that you need. Now, back to what I was talking about at the beginning of this episode and men who are gossips. The other half of wounded feminine energy when it comes to the things we say is that just like you close your mouth when it should be open, is also opening your mouth when it should be closed. These are people who constantly complain. I'm trying to be very careful about this, how I say this. I know a woman. I can't really say how I know this woman, because if I said how I knew her, I would give away some things. So I know this woman, and honestly, I can't really say that I talk to her very often. I talk to her occasionally, but she and I are in a very similar circle. So whenever I hear about her, whenever someone tells me something that is going on with her, back to this whole idea of gossip. But whenever I hear something that's going on with her, it is always that she has found herself in another sob story, right? She's found herself in another bad situation, and she goes on and on about how bad the thing is, in hopes that someone will come through and rescue her and give her the things that she needs. And it's very interesting to me because this is someone that I've known for quite a while. And for someone who is always in bad situations, she is always remarkably taken care of. She will talk about being in very dire straits, but, I, again, don't talk to her very often, but I see her often enough to know that when I see her, as far as I can see, all her bills are paid. She's taking vacations. She seems to be doing just fine. But I point this out because part of that wounded feminine energy is because you didn't receive that emotional support, that emotional help, that nurturing when you were a child. As an adult, it is not uncommon to put yourself into spaces in which you will constantly cry out for help. So complain and maybe make your situation a little bit worse than it actually is, in hopes of, if you do these things, you'll get the nurturing and the pity and the support that you so desperately needed as a child. In addition to that, this is where also that gossip comes in. So I mentioned before that the men that I grew up with in church were major gossips, and I singled them out, one, because it is an example of wounded feminine in a masculine person, in a straight man, but also because since these were men that I grew up with, and I grew up in a family church, like, I had the opportunity to know some of their mothers as well. And, I knew some of their stories of, again, sometimes these were bad women involved. Sometimes these were mothers who were trash. But I also knew cases where these were mothers who were, again, ill-equipped. They were doing the best they could. They just didn't really have what it took. They became mothers before they were emotionally ready to. And seeing how it manifested in their sons was a lot of gossip. And what people tend to not understand about gossip is that it's not just about entertaining yourselves with a story about somebody else's life, right? Like, honestly, that's bad enough. We shouldn't feel the need to make ourselves feel better at the expense of other people's misfortunes. At the same time, gossip is also about being highly critical of others. And typically, when people are highly critical of others, it comes from a place of not feeling good enough within themselves. So, if you were not getting the emotional support that you needed as a child, particularly from your mother, you know, is stereotypical, yes, but we expect moms to be nurturing so much more so than we expect that out of our dads. So if the woman who was supposed to nurture you did not, you can end up in a situation where you start constantly feeling like, what is wrong with me? Why am I so defective, inadequate, that this person who's supposed to naturally be nurturing is not, right? So because of this, we get in situations where in order to make ourselves feel better, we may start looking outside of us for situations where, well, I know I'm not perfect, but at least I'm not that, right? So because of this, this is where gossip comes into play. This being highly critical of others, talking down others as a way of trying to build ourselves up, make ourselves more worthy, make ourselves feel like, as, yeah, it's true that I didn't get the support that I needed growing up. It's true that I wasn't taken care of the way that I should have been. But obviously it wasn't me. Obviously it was other people, because look, with all the things going on in my life is nowhere near as messy as this person's. It's not until you learn to really take radical responsibility for yourself, to really work on healing yourself, to seek therapy, counseling, coaching. It's not until you really learn to work on those inner wounds, on those childhood wounds, that you'll stop feeling the need to constantly compare yourself to other people. And, at the end of the day, that's what gossip is. When you are happy and fulfilled with your own life, you don't feel the need to constantly watch other people's lives. This is kind of a side note, but really related. This is something that I tell clients of mine all the time when they talk about the manosphere and they talk about these so-called alpha males with podcasts and the advice they give. Like, consider the source. If a man were in a happy relationship, if he loved himself, if he had a lot going on for his life, he wouldn't feel the need to spend several hours per week creating a podcast aimed specifically at tearing women down. The women that would never give him a second look to begin with. Same with like social media, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. If you have a man who is constantly in the comments section tearing down women, telling them that they should choose better, or saying that no one wants them. My dad has been married for almost 4 decades now. My brother and my brother-in-law have been married for several years themselves, and you don't see them doing those things in the comment section. I can think of other men in my life, men that I've grown up with, that I'm friends with, who are happily married. They're not in the comment section telling women to choose better. You know why? Because they're busy enjoying their lives. It is the chronically single men. It is the men who talk down about baby mamas, but have made at least one woman a baby mama themselves. These are the men who have all the time in the world to hop up in the comment section. So, yeah, consider the source and bringing this back to you, the more important person in the discussion. Consider your own mouth. Are you operating from a place of woundedness? Are you operating from a place of not feeling enough? Are you operating from a place of being afraid to express your needs? And are you operating from a place of wanting to be in discussions all the time as a matter of attention seeking, of wanting other people to finally give you the acknowledgement that, growing up, your authority figures didn't or couldn't give to you? So take some time to think on these things and let me know what you think of this episode. I do have an Instagram reel that is shorter that touches on this subject. Feel free to comment there. I'm at Keisha Rice on Instagram, KESHIARICE. But just, drop me a message on Instagram or TikTok or YouTube. I'm at Keisha Rice in all those places. And let me know what you think of this episode. Talk to you later. Love you. Hey there. So you made it all the way to the end of the episode, which means I have two things to say. One, thank you so much. I truly appreciate it. And two, you like me. You really like me. So I would appreciate it if you would show that like by subscribing to this podcast so that more people can hear about it and enjoy it as much as you do. And if you want to know more about any of the links that I mentioned on this episode or any guests that I've had, be sure to go to KeishaRice.com/links. That's KESHIARICE.com/links. I can't wait to talk to you again in the next episode. So see you then.